All right, welcome back to another episode of Mainly Hoops. Today we're going to be talking about matchup between St. John's and Alabama. So, Cody, what are your initial thoughts to this game?
Yeah, I guess the biggest note here is, are Alabama's, wing guys going to be in the mix, or their best shooters going to be in the mix? And Aiden Holloway and Latrell Wrightsell, they missed the opening night game, but I think they're very crucial to this game, obviously, to kind of help out LeBaron Philon when he's able to create these open catch and shoot threes. Because the guys that they're throwing in the mix right now are obviously like they're good offensive options. Like Houston Millett is in the mix there, and some of those other pieces, and like Amari Allen, London Jamison, like they're starting a lot of younger pieces now. But overall, this Alabama team, I think without those guys, they could be in some trouble here against St. John's in their first road game of the season. I'm a little bit worried about what Alabama is going to do up front against the front court group of Zuby Ejiofor, Dylan Mitchell, and Bryce Hopkins. I think there's going to be real opportunity for him to get on the glass and have some success at the rim. A little bit lower on the Williamson and Sherrell duo at the center spot. I think if they stick to that base drop coverage, I think guys like Ian Jackson and Sellers and Sandin are going to be able to get to their spots and get what they want. Like especially Ian Jackson, if he's able to earn Patino's trust for any longer than 5 minutes in a game, like yeah, I definitely wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't count on it with anybody on this roster. You make a poor decision, you're probably going to be sitting on the bench a little bit, unless you're Zuby Ejiofor. I think he's kind of proven that he can be trusted. But so I think particularly Ian Jackson, in the screen and roll game, getting downhill, like attacking these bigs, I think he can have a lot of success. And overall, I also think St. John's can kind of get on all over the glass against Alabama. I'm intrigued to see like these St. John's perimeter defenders against the perimeter group of Alabama. We mentioned it in the team preview, like these guys and Ian Jackson, Sellers, and Sandin, like they all were the worst defenders on their rosters by defensive box plus minus in that metric. And obviously I think you get a Patino boost on the defensive end. Like you need to defend or else you're not going to play. And I think they kind of understand that. But overall, I just don't think you can like flip a switch and immediately be a fantastic defender. Like I do think these guys are a little bit, limited on that end for the most part. Like Sandin, I think has some like some issues as like a lateral mover. I don't think he opens his hips a little bit too early, like allows drives at too high of a rate. And against this Alabama team with guys like Philon and then Holloway, if they're in the mix, like a Davion Hannah as well, I think those guys can have success getting downhill and creating those shrink threes that Nate Oats loves to create. So I do think there's a little push pull on both sides, but overall I do think St. John's has some advantages on both ends.
Marcus, what about you? Who do you like in this?
I like St. John's. I think St. John's could kind of handle this pretty easily, especially like Cody said, if Holloway and Wrightsell can't go. It puts a lot on Philon's plate, along with several younger pieces. This Alabama team did turn it over 15 times the other night. Against North Dakota. And you're granted these perimeter defenders, like Cody mentioned, on St. John's aren't what they had last year. It's still a defense they're going to play how Rick Pitino wants to play, and they're going to try and speed you up. They're going to try and turn you over. They forced 22 turnovers on opening night. It's clearly, it was Quinnipiac, but it's still clearly an emphasis on the defensive end. So to me, that's an area to watch, especially if they don't get like a guy like Holloway back, having a little bit more experience to kind of help Philon shoulder that load against this team. And then the offensive glass is obviously going to be an area where St. John's can have success. Guys like Mitchell, Ejiofor, Hopkins, all three of those guys, especially when they're playing together, I think they can really get on this defensive glass. We talked about, on the offensive glass, and when they get those offensive rebounds, I think they should be able to score at the rim pretty easily. Like last game, Sherrell did have 4 blocks, but we talked about in the offseason, like this rim protection group of Alabama is not all that daunting. So I do think that St. John's is going to be able to have success around the rim in the paint and on the offensive glass on the offensive end. If those guys can't go for Alabama, a lot's going to fall on the plate of Philon. He's going to need to have a pretty massive game, and then some of those younger guys are really going to need to play up. We saw like Amari Allen played 32 minutes. He played well. I mean, he threw up a 12, 7, and 5 stat line. Like pretty solid in his first game. London Jemison had 12. Davion Hannah had 9. Granted, he turned it over 4 times, but it's really going to require these guys to go on the road against, a lesser St. John's defense than a year ago, but still, like, it has that persona, like the Rick Pitino defense. They're going to come out, pressure you, play hard, regardless of whether the talent's a little bit worse or not. I definitely like St. John's here. If Alabama can get those 2 guys back, I think there are avenues for them to keep it close and potentially squeak this one out, but it's not going to be an easy game to win.
Yeah, I'm with you both. I think St. John's wins this, but if either Holloway or Wrightsell play, I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama won. I think both these teams are going to be 2 of the more volatile teams in the country. I think both are going to have their extreme highs and extreme lows. With St. John's, I think ball security is going to be a huge issue with the lack of a true point guard. I mean, there were talks about Ian Jackson being the starting point guard, which is frankly just laughable. And then Alabama, it's just going to be, do they have guys who can make shots with Holloway and Wrightsell out? So I think it could go either way. But I think it just depends on which team shows up for both of these guys. Cody, what do you think is the biggest key for St. John's to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, St. John's also has Dylan Darling to rescue the point guard issues. Obviously, I'm kidding there. I don't think he's all that great as I mean, he's going to be a backup guard for this team overall. I wasn't very high on what he did at Washington State in his early years, and obviously he's been much better. I believe, was he Idaho State? That's where he was last year.
I think that's what. Yeah,
I believe it was Idaho State. It was a big sky school. I know that, but he's going to play a role. When Pitino puts one of those guards in jail on the bench for a half. You've seen him sit, Ian Jackson for a whole half in an exhibition game, which is pretty insane. And Isaiah Sellers kind of sat over there on the bench. Did he play like 8 minutes in the game against Michigan? But overall, it's kind of just the things I mentioned. It's like assert your dominance if you're St. John's on the offensive glass, which I absolutely think they can do. And then the other thing is just keep LeBaron and Philon out of the paint, so you're unable to generate these catch and shoot threes, regardless if Holloway and Wrightsell are in the game. Like, that's still going to be the game plan for Nate Oats. It's going to be a heavy rim and 3 offense. Like, Philon's going to be operating in primary actions, and these other off-ball shooters are going to be ready to capitalize when he's able to get a foot into the paint. So, and I just need to see these St. John's perimeter defenders kind of hold their own. Have they improved over the summer and the offseason as perimeter defenders to be able to play the Pitino scheme at a competent level? So, yeah, they're going to need to contain Philon, and they're just going to have to be really good on the offensive glass and, just attack these Alabama bigs at the rim.
Yeah. Marcus, what about you? I know you like St. John's to win this game, but what can Alabama do to win this game?
I mean, hopefully, I think first get healthy. Like, if they're healthy, I think we've mentioned a couple times, that's a key to winning this game. But, can they take care of the basketball against the St. John's defense? Can they limit St. John's second chance opportunities? Can maybe their tempo actually speed up or St. John's, guards or lack thereof, at least on the ball, and force them into some turnovers? We know that Alabama isn't really a team that turns people over. It's never been a strength of theirs. They only forced 10 turnovers against North Dakota. But can they get some of these, maybe not in the turnover sense, but can they get some of these guards for St. John's to speed up and take, poor shots, and make bad decisions with the ball? I think that especially if Holloway plays, with Philon, I think they're going to be able to go and kind of try and turn this into a track meet a little bit. But I think the biggest things are taking care of the ball and limiting second chance points.
Yeah, should be a fun one to start off our Saturdays. Noon game at Madison Square Garden. It doesn't get much better than that. So hope you guys like this content. Let us know in the comments down below.